Is Tennessee's offense no longer in vogue? We have heard from several different recruiting, or not recruiting rankings, but several different rankings of teams. And Tennessee's typically lower on the list than you would think. You also have Tennessee's defense getting some respect with the James Pierce and the EA Sports thing, and that's great. But is Tennessee's offense still in vogue? Caleb, I usually ask you first, but I'm going to go first on this. And I'm going to say, yes, it absolutely is. And it's still in vogue because I believe that coaches and people that know football realize how dangerous it is to play as long as the rules, which we discussed yesterday, of releasing offensive linemen downfield are still in order. That changes, everything else changes. But for now, I think opposing coaches realize how dangerous it is. The media, though, Caleb, may be a way different story.
Yes. So for those who don't know, I brought up this question because there's been a lot of, from local and national media, a lot of people much more down on the Vols than Dave and I are this year. And we were kind of wondering what's going on. Why is this? And a big thing that happened was the drop-off offensively for Tennessee last year from the year before. And there came a belief that Tennessee's offense is just not the flashy offense it was with Hendon Hooker. Now, elephant in the room, there was a change in quarterback to a quarterback not fit for Tennessee's system. But here's what I think threw people off, Dave. The Orange Bowl at the end of the 2022 season that Joe Milton won Orange Bowl MVP. That game led everybody to believe that there would be no drop-off in the offense whatsoever. It's good no matter what. It doesn't matter who the quarterback is. And probably hurt Hendon Hooker's draft stock because people like Mel Kiper don't do their research. And then Joe Milton, the offense reverted to what we were all concerned it would be under him as the season progressed in 2023. So then came the idea, people in their mind are thinking, well, we had these high expectations after the Orange Bowl, but then the offense got figured out the next season, or there was a drop-off. So obviously what must have happened is coaches figured out the Tennessee offense, and it's just not going to be flashy anymore. I don't think anybody's figured out this offense.
I don't think anybody's figured it out. I think there's another bowl game I want to cite in that year before that I think is significant in the reason that Tennessee is viewed as, by some people I've talked to in the media, a flash in the pan, that Hooker was a flash in the pan. You're not just going to get Hooker all the time. So you get this Hooker weekdays at 10 a.m. Eastern time. But when with Tennessee's offense, I think that the biggest factor is the reason they're still going to be in vogue and in vogue for the remainder of Josh Heupel's days is that they run the football. That is important to them. They run the football, and I believe that Tennessee will continue to rely on that. Who the superstars will be on the outside, we're not real sure. But I think Tennessee has a special quarterback too. But the bowl game that I want to cite specifically is going back to the 2022 season. It's Georgia.
Well, that's the one I did. Oh, sorry.
No,
sorry.
It's Georgia. It's Georgia thumping TCU 65-7. Now, you and I know that Tennessee's offense and TCU's offense is not the same, right?
Right.
Do you want to explain real quick? Give me a quick thumbnail of how they're different for those that don't know.
So for those who don't know, Sonny Dykes, they both actually have Mike Leach influences, but Sonny Dykes runs the air raid.
Right.
The air raid is almost exclusively a horizontal passing attack. There are no vertical attacks from the air raid. And they don't spread the field horizontally as much, and there's far fewer reads, which makes it a little bit more simple and a little bit easier to figure out. We know it's not the same, but I'm going to go ahead and tell you that average Joe media guy that I bump into at SEC Media Days in Dallas next week doesn't know that. Okay. I mean, you know more football than 90% of the people I've worked with. I'll go ahead and tell you that. So my thinking is they're seeing that and they're saying Tennessee's a flash in the pan, just like TCU was. I don't agree with that, but I do think that contention is out there.
that they would face Georgia and get thumped the same way because they run the exact same offense, which isn't true.
And anybody who did their research, you're right, would know that's not true because Sonny Dykes, that Georgia TCU game, you know what that was very reminiscent of, Dave? Do you remember those 90s games between Tennessee and Kentucky and Hal Mummy's Kentucky teams where Tennessee would regularly drop 50 and 60 points on Kentucky? Like they would, I think, didn't they have a period where they went over 50 on Kentucky 5 straight years or something like that? And just blew them out because the air raid, as we've always said, and I've always told you guys this, the air raid overcomes lack of talent, but the air raid also has a ceiling. The air raid has a ceiling no matter how good you are. That's not Josh Heupel's offense. It overcomes lack of talent, but it also doesn't have a ceiling. It also can be really, 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 really explosive depending on the right weapons. And I think part of what happened was we have to, so you are right, that Georgia TCU game really kind of made people think, oh, because 2022 offenses were in vogue. You had obviously Hendon Hooker, you had Caleb Williams with the Heisman.
Even Stetson Bennett was playing really, really well, if you remember.
Yes, that's very true. So I think with Georgia winning it and then Michigan winning it this past year, there's this idea that offenses are not in vogue. And then with Josh Heupel in Tennessee specifically, there's the idea that the offense got figured out. The Orange Bowl, people did not do their research on that game. Dave, you and I covered that game. Yes, Joe Milton looked good. Clemson played a bear coverage over the middle, did they not? They were basically leaving the middle of the field so open that you and I could have completed throws over the middle in that game.
And there's also an advantage, I think, playing a quarterback with little film on him too. We realized that he was a little bit better throwing the underneath stuff, even though that didn't translate to the next year. There's always a surprise with a first time quarterback, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah, it's actually it reminded me of, remember the Broncos Steelers playoff game where Tim Tebow went off?
Yes.
The Steelers, they dared him to beat single coverage on the outside. And Tim Tebow did beat single coverage to his credit. Barely. But that doesn't mean that Tim Tebow was going to be a long-term NFL quarterback. That was just a test run on him. And it's can you do this basic thing? So with Joe Milton, they were like, can you do this basic thing of completing passes over the middle if we play bear coverage? Not to mention the fact that Clemson didn't get off the bus for that Orange Bowl. Okay, I'm sorry. They didn't care to be there. They cared as much to be there as, here's a history one for you, Dave, as much as Tennessee cared to be in the Peach Bowl when they played Clemson 20 years ago, which I'm sure you covered that game.
Yeah, I agree with Fallout Zone that said Clemson was so vanilla, but I do think some of this, though, guys on the message board tell me if I don't have the battered ball syndrome. I don't take it to heart maybe as hard as some of you guys, and I try to let my emotions affect my reporting. I don't have that, but I do feel like some of this is from a national media perspective that doesn't really care for the Vols all that much. And I hate it when people say that because every team likes to say, oh, the national media doesn't like us. The officiating was against us. No, that's not always the case. But I think Ball Twitter is pretty strong. You pointed this out to me, and I think they push people back, and I don't think these people like to be pushed. Pat 40. So I think there's some of that. And let's face it, a lot of these media members are what, in their 30s, early 40s? They've seen Tennessee beat dog stuff for a long time. So I think it's natural for a media member to either say, these guys pushed back on me really hard, I got ripped in the wind, or they've been horrible, so they'll be horrible again because history repeats itself. Yes, I think Tennessee's offense is no longer in vogue with the national media, but I think the national media is out of touch.
Yes, it's very similar to, it's funny you bring that up, Dave, back in 2015, I guess would be the year, like, Dabo Swinney was stacking up recruiting classes. Nobody was paying attention, but people still weren't having Clemson as in their top 10. No one really thought, oh, this is a national title caliber program. You in your mind were like, that's just not what Clemson does. And so even though they had stacked up on recruiting classes, they had stacked up on generational quarterbacks, some who were of very questionable character. You couldn't bring yourself to admit that they had title caliber teams, could you?
No.
During that time.
No, you couldn't. You definitely couldn't. Does Tennessee have a title caliber team now? That's debatable. You think they do. I think they're right there. The other thing that I think the national media needs to remember, this Tennessee offense has not had a full complement of 11 talented players by SEC standards, have they? I mean, let's not forget that Cedric Tillman was their number one receiver, and he got hurt in 2022. So, I mean, across the board, they haven't been as talented as they will be in the future or are this year, correct? I mean, the talent level has improved under Heupel. Or
I'm only saying that because of the quarterback this year. I think the talent in 2022 on 11 guys may have been better. Look, I bid on this. I'm sorry, and people may not want to be honest with themselves about this, but Jeremy Pruitt left Josh Heupel more talent than Josh Heupel is giving himself. Even though for offense, he evaluated the talent well. He's the one who got Darnell right. That whole offensive line was Jeremy Pruitt's offensive line. Jalen Hyatt was Jeremy Pruitt's receiver.
I would state it like this. I do have concerns about the offensive line. I think that Jeremy Pruitt left Josh Heupel more talent than we thought at the time. I think it'll prove out. I may be wrong, but I think it'll prove out that they will recruit at about the same level. But I got concerns about the offensive line.